Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Beyond World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Janna.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar. And on the show today, there is fresh scrutiny around Jeffrey Epstein's network as Ghislaine Maxwell stonewalls U.S. lawmakers. The jailed former associate refused to answer questions in a closed-door House oversight deposition as newly released Justice Department files reignite allegations involving former Duke of York, Andrew. Now, King Charles has pledged full support for any British police assessment that is underway. We'll get you all the details on that.
Also on World DNA, we bring you more details coming in from Australia, where Prime Minister Albanese has condemned violent clashes at a Sydney protest against a visit by Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Police used pepper spray and made multiple arrests as demonstrators tried to breach restricted areas, sparking public outrage over images showing officers confronting protesters and media. More details coming up on World DNA. Let's start with the headlines first.
Pakistan's government revises its decision, orders its cricket team to face India in T20 World Cup match on February 15th.
US Southern Command reports 2 people killed and 1 survived in a strike on suspected drug smuggling boat in the Eastern Pacific, bringing the total deaths from such operations to at least 130 in 38 such strikes.
U.S. President threatens to block opening of $4.7 billion Gordie Howe International Bridge between Michigan and Ontario, demanding compensation and fair treatment from Canada before it opens later this year.
Iran intensifies its crackdown after recent protests, making more arrests, including reformist spokesperson Javad Imam, while signaling openness to further nuclear talks with the US following discussions in Oman.
Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell refuses to answer questions from U.S. lawmakers, but her attorney says she is prepared to speak if granted clemency by President Donald Trump.
Keir Starmer refuses to resign amid calls from Scottish Labour leader for embroiling the British government in the Epstein scandal. Senior ministers rally behind the UK Prime Minister as far-right parties gain in the polls.
Australia's Prime Minister says he is devastated by scenes of clashes at a Sydney rally against a visit by Israeli President Isaac Herzog, but defends the police's actions against protesters.
Israel's military says it killed 4 armed militants who emerged from a tunnel in southern Gaza and attacked its troops, accusing the suspects of a blatant violation of the ceasefire.
U.S. and Bangladesh have reached a new trade deal, cutting American tariffs on Bangladeshi goods to 19% and opening the door to duty-free access for some textiles. A move expected to boost Bangladesh's key garment industry and strengthen trade ties. Now, the avalanche of Epstein files has shaken several countries and raised question over the conduct of many high-profile names, and it seems there are more names yet to come out.
Well, US lawmakers say they have uncovered names of at least 6 men who are likely incriminated by their inclusion in the Epstein files. U.S. Representatives Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna made the claim after reviewing unredacted versions of these documents related to the late convicted sex offender.
But what I saw that bothered me were the names of at least 6 men that have been redacted that are likely incriminated by their inclusion in these files. So that's the first thing that I saw. It took some digging to find them.
I mean, there are 6 men, some of them with their photographs that have been redacted, and there's no explanation why those people were redacted. And Thomas discovered it through his MIT logic with some of the searches. But, you know, that's really concerning.
Massie told reporters that one of the men is pretty high up in a foreign government and another is a prominent individual. Massie and Khanna said that many of the files they viewed were still redacted, meaning they came to the Justice Department either from the FBI or a grand jury. The lawmakers also said that some of the files taken down by DOJ were still not available for review.
Lawmakers said they want to allow Justice Department time to further unredact those files, but they have also proposed sharing the names on the House floor. If the lawmakers read these names on the floor, they would be protected by the House speech and debate clause, providing them with immunity from civil or criminal liability.
And this comes as Jeffrey Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell refused to answer questions at a deposition before a congressional panel. Though her attorney, Maxwell, said she would consider answering questions in exchange for clemency or a pardon from President Donald Trump. Maxwell was found guilty in 2021 for her role in helping Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls and is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence.
Ms. Maxwell, did you at any time play any role in Jeffrey Epstein's activities involving the recruitment, grooming, or trafficking of young women or girls?
I invoke my Fifth Amendment right to silence.
Well, Democrats on the committee accused Maxwell of using the deposition to campaign for clemency and called U.S. President Trump to rule out such a move.
She is telling Donald Trump through her deposition that she is trying to buy her clemency. Now, she did state that she is taking and invoking her Fifth Amendment rights because of a pending habeas petition before the Southern District of New York. But let us be clear. Her case appeals have already gone to the United States Supreme Court and they have been denied. She is not being released from jail unless, of course, Donald Trump buys what she's selling.
Representative Stansbury also targeted President Trump for asking Americans to move on from the Epstein scandal. She pointed out at the growing list of countries that are now investigating or pushing leaders to step down over the Epstein files. Now, Stansbury said that it is not time to move on, but a time for accountability.
And there's more on this from our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, who sent us this report from New York.
Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted associate of Jeffrey Epstein, who is serving a 20-year sentence, refused to answer questions during a closed-door virtual deposition before the Republican-led House Oversight Committee. This happened on Monday. Invoking her Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, Maxwell declined to respond to inquiries about possible co-conspirators and men who may have settled with Epstein victims, leaving lawmakers frustrated and without any new information. Her attorney has said that she will only testify fully if granted clemency by President Donald Trump. The deposition is part of a broader congressional effort to scrutinize how Epstein abused his victims and the networks operated around it and how previous federal decisions were ultimately handled. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he will not walk away after surviving an attempt to force him out of office.
Starmer has been facing calls to resign for embroiling the British government in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Starmer is facing the fire for appointing Peter Mandelson as U.S. ambassador, and this is despite knowing he had maintained links to the late convicted sex offender Epstein.
Earlier on Monday, Starmer lost his second top aide in 2 days when his communications chief, Tim Allen, quit just months into the role. Starmer's chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, has resigned on Sunday for advising Starmer to appoint Mandelson.
Now, several cabinet ministers came out in support of Prime Minister, including his deputy, David Lammy, Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper, and Finance Minister Rachel Reeves. Even former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner and Interior Minister Shabana Mahmood, both tipped as possible replacements for Starmer, expressed their full support for their leader.
Scotland's Labour leader, Anna Sarwar, called for the UK Prime Minister to step down after referring to the Mandelson-Epstein scandal as a quote-unquote failure of Downing Street.
My first priority and my first loyalty is to my country, Scotland. And I am not willing to sacrifice Scotland's NHS, our schools, our communities, our towns, cities, villages and islands to a third decade of an SNP government. That's why the distraction needs to end and the leadership in Downing Street has to change.
Sarwar and Labour's other Scottish lawmakers are due to face Scottish parliamentary elections in May, and meanwhile opposition party leaders have also turned up the heat on the Prime Minister.
Right now we have a government that's focusing purely on its own internal psychodrama. Enough of that. It is time for them to get a grip and start governing the country.
He'll be gone and replaced by somebody undoubtedly far worse. It took the Conservatives 14 years, 14 long years of disaster to get into the mess they did, and this mob have managed it within a space of 18 months. I suppose you've got to admire it, really.
And over to some news from the World Cup. The India versus Pakistan match at the T20 World Cup is back on track.
The Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has reversed his own order and asked the country's cricket board to, in fact, go ahead with the match as originally scheduled. In a statement, the Pakistan government said, I quote from it, in view of the outcomes achieved in multilateral discussions as well as the request of friendly countries, the government of Pakistan hereby directs the Pakistan national cricket team to take the field on February 15th, 2026 for its scheduled fixture in the ICC Men's T20 World Cup.
And this brings an end to a 10-day standoff, which had cast a dark shadow or dark cloud over the most anticipated match of the tournament. Now, earlier this month, Pakistan announced that it would participate in the World Cup but would boycott the match against India on February 15th in Colombo at the direction of the country's government. The Shehbaz Sharif government had ordered the PCB to boycott the match to show solidarity with Bangladesh.
The change in Pakistan's stance comes after a meeting between the ICC, PCB and the Bangladesh Cricket Board. ICC Deputy Chief Imran Khwaja was in Lahore over the weekend, where he met PCB Chief Mohsin Naqvi and BCB President Aminul Islam. The initial signs weren't promising, as reports emerged that the ICC had rejected all of Pakistan's demands.
Well, but late on Monday, cricket's global governing body came out with a statement. They announced that Bangladesh would not face any sanctions for pulling out of the World Cup at the last moment, and that was swiftly followed by a BCB statement where its president requested Pakistan to play the match. Well, it was a clear sign of those frenetic negotiations bearing fruit.
Soon after, the Pakistan government gave the green light to its board to play the match. Pakistan's statement also confirmed that a number of ICC members had urged them not to boycott the match, citing the financial impact.
And confirming the end of the standoff, the ICC said in a statement, and I'm quoting right here, the dialogue between ICC and PCB took place as part of a broader engagement with both the parties recognizing the need for constructive dealings and being united, committed, and purposeful in their aspirations to serve the best interests of the game with integrity, neutrality, and cooperation.
Shifting focus to Australia now, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has strongly condemned clashes that erupted at a rally opposing the state visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog.
Now, thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators rallying clashed with the police in Sydney. Officers used pepper spray, tear gas, and made multiple arrests as tensions mounted outside Sydney Town Hall. The protest escalated allegedly after speakers called for a march beyond permitted areas, and this prompted a heavy police response and confrontation along George Street. Well, critics have condemned the incident as what they described as excessive use of force.
I am Jewish and I'm deeply opposed to the presence of Isaac Herzog in Australia because of his really ugly racist record for years, long before October 7. And the idea somehow that Herzog is here to bring unity is absurd. He actually brings division. And as a human and an Australian and a Jew, I'm here to say not in my name.
Prime Minister Albanese said that he is devastated by the scenes that unfolded. He defended the police actions against protesters, describing the scenes of violence in Sydney as unacceptable and urging demonstrators to express their views peacefully. The Prime Minister emphasized that while Australians are free to protest, resorting to disorder undermines democratic values.
Now, Israeli president is on a 4-day visit to meet Australia's Jewish community after the shooting at Sydney's Bondi Beach that killed 15 people at a Hanukkah festival in December last year. Well, Sydney authorities designated Herzog's visit as a major event, granting police rarely use powers during the visit. Now, this includes authority to disperse and relocate crowds, limit access to specific areas, order people to leave, and conduct vehicle searches. Well, on Monday, a Sydney court had also rejected a legal challenge by Palestine Action Group, which organized a protest against restrictions imposed on demonstration. And the UN has called on Israel to reverse its decision on expanding its powers in the occupied West Bank,
saying that it threatens the two-state solution. And this comes as Indonesia prepares for a possible deployment of troops to southern Gaza in the coming weeks, while a Palestinian committee visited the Rafah crossing to review operations. According to reports, several thousand Indonesian troops may soon be deployed to southern Gaza in the coming weeks, as I mentioned, shortly after Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto visits Washington for US President Donald Trump's Peace to Prosperity Summit on the 19th of February. According to reports, the soldiers are expected to be stationed in Rafah, where new offices and living quarters are being built. If Indonesian troops are deployed, it would mark the first international stabilization force since the ceasefire. Indonesia's defense minister last November said that they have trained up to 20,000 troops for health and construction tasks.
The Palestinian committee charged with overseeing day-to-day affairs in Gaza visited the Rafah crossing and said passage through the border with Egypt is improving after a chaotic first week of reopening. The Rafah crossing opened last week for the first time since mid-2024, one of the main requirements for the U.S.-backed ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
It was briefly closed last Friday and Saturday amid confusion over procedures. The European Union border mission overseeing the crossing said 284 Palestinians have crossed since the operations resumed. These included returnees, medical evacuees, and their escorts. Palestinian officials say nearly 20,000 people are seeking to leave Gaza for medical care, while hospitals report 5 deaths in the past 24 hours as tensions remain high.
The diligent work of the committee began with its first task of opening the Rafah crossing. Today, we are reviewing the logistical procedures for the movement of Palestinian citizens to and from the Rafah crossing. This work took a long time, after which we began working on an appropriate relief plan and on the entry of necessary humanitarian supplies, especially essential health and educational materials for our people in Palestine.
Now, these developments come as international criticism of Israel's policies in the occupied West Bank intensifies. The United Nations has urged Israel to roll back new measures expanding administrative and security control in the territory. The UN warns the steps could undermine prospects for peace and jeopardize hopes for a two-state solution.
This government is a fascist government that want to control all areas of the West Bank, areas A, B and C, and does not want a Palestinian presence in the West Bank or Gaza. They want to displace the Palestinian people and they want the land to be without inhabitants.
Meanwhile, Palestinian officials warn Israel's newly approved measures to expand powers in the occupied West Bank amount to a de facto annexation and call for stronger international intervention. Local leaders in Hebron voice fears over steps to undermine the two-state solution. Weeks after repressing a wave of protests, Iran has taken a two-track approach now. It is rounding up and jailing perceived critics and at the same time also pursuing diplomatic openings with the US.
Now, a spokesperson for the main reformist coalition told local media that Iran's Revolutionary Guards have arrested the group's spokesperson, Javad Imam, along with 4 others. Several activists and filmmakers who co-signed a protest statement were also detained.
Iran's government has branded the protests as riots fueled by Israel and the US. In a statement on Monday, the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, urged people to show resolve against foreign pressure. However, alongside its defiant pronouncements, Iran has signaled that it could come to some kind of deal to dial back its nuclear program to avoid further conflicts.
Local media reported that Iranian Atomic Agency Chief Mohammad Islami has said Tehran could dilute its highly enriched uranium in return for sanctions relief. Diluting or downblending uranium means mixing it with other substances to reduce the enrichment level so the final product does not exceed a given threshold, and thus extending the amount of time it would take Iran to create sufficient nuclear material for a bomb.
At the talks in Oman, the US and Iran agreed to discuss Tehran's nuclear program, though Washington and Israel also want to put its ballistic missiles and support for regional militant groups on the agenda. Iranian officials have repeatedly ruled out putting Iran's missiles, one of the largest such arsenals in West Asia, up for discussions.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian said that the new round of nuclear negotiations is an appropriate opportunity for a fair and balanced resolution of Iran's nuclear issue, calling on the U.S. to avoid excessive demands.
The Islamic Republic of Iran, for its part, will take steps toward the success of this path and hopes that the other side will also remain committed to this objective and its requirements without making excessive demands so that a desirable outcome can be achieved.
Now, Cuba is facing its gravest crisis in decades as fuel shortages, blackouts, and sanctions bring life in the island to a standstill.
Emergency measures have been effected to conserve fuel as supplies dwindle under U.S. economic pressure. The government has closed universities, reduced school hours and the work week. They've cut public transportation and even limited fuel sales.
Power outages lasting 12 to 15 hours a day have become a routine in Havana and across the island. Energy analysts and international trade monitoring agencies say Cuba's fuel reserves are just enough to meet 3 weeks of total domestic demand.
The electricity shortfall has disrupted water pumping and food storage as the country relies on imported fuels for roughly 95% of its energy needs. Cuba warned international airlines that jet fuel will no longer be available on the island. According to a notice to aviation, the shortfall is set to last from February 10th through March 11th and comes just days after top officials said air travel would not be impacted by a fuel rationing plan.
And this has led airlines, including Air Canada, to suspend its service to Cuba. The carrier said it plans to fly empty planes to pick up approximately 3,000 passengers on the island and return them home.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed that crude oil shipments from her country to Cuba have been halted. And this is while Mexico seeks ways to resume them following U.S. threats to impose tariffs on nations supplying oil to the Caribbean island.
This sanction being imposed on countries that sell oil to Cuba is very unjust, very unfair. It's not right because sanctions that affect the people are not right. You can agree or disagree with Cuba's government regime, but the people should never be affected.
Puede uno estar de acuerdo o no.
Cuba has long depended on Venezuela for much of its jet fuel, but it has received no crude or refined products since mid-December, when the U.S. moved to block Venezuela's exports.
Donald Trump has since vowed Cuba will receive no more Venezuelan oil and has threatened tariffs on any country that supplies fuel to the island. The island of 9.6 million inhabitants has been under a U.S. trade embargo since 1962, enduring years of economic crisis marked by extended power cuts and shortages of fuel, medicine and food.
It's now time for a very short break on World DNA. We'll be back with more news and updates on the other side. With China now has dismissed U.S. allegations of secret nuclear explosive tests, calling the claim outright lies. Now, what's that all about? We'll tell you all on the other side.
And details coming up as Bangladesh and the United States have signed a reciprocal tariff agreement, marking a major step forward in their bilateral trade and economic relations. We'll bring you details on that and more as World DNA continues after the short break. Come right back.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION. World is One. WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with Jyotsna. I'm Shivan. Lots more to discuss. Let's start with the headlines.
White House official says President Trump opposes Israel's annexation of West Bank, calling a stable West Bank vital for Israel's security and regional peace after Israeli ministers announced plans to extend control over territory.
Reports say Japan will join NATO-led initiative to support Ukraine by providing funding for non-lethal US-made defense equipment. Marks significant contribution to the alliance's ongoing efforts amid the war.
U.S. Southern Command reports two people killed and one survived in strike on suspected drug smuggling boat in the Eastern Pacific, bringing the total deaths from such operations to at least 130 in 38 such strikes.
U.S. President threatens to block the opening of $4.7 billion Gordie Howe International Bridge between Michigan and Ontario, demanding compensation and fair treatment from Canada before it opens later this year.
Iran intensifies its crackdown after recent protests, making more arrests, including reformist spokesperson Javed Imam, while signaling openness to further nuclear talks with U.S. following discussions in Oman.
Keir Starmer refuses to resign amid calls from Scottish Labour leader for embroiling British government in the Epstein scandal. Senior ministers rally behind the UK Prime Minister as far-right parties gain in the polls.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado says she still plans to return to Venezuela despite armed government agents detaining her close ally Juan Pablo Guanipa hours after he was released from prison.
Global markets rallied as Japanese stocks hit a record high after Prime Minister Sanae Takeichi's landslide election win, boosting hopes for stimulus. Gains spread across Asia, Europe and Wall Street, where the Dow logged another record close.
Pakistan's government revises its decision, orders its cricket team to face India in T20 World Cup match on February 15th in Colombo, after talks with ICC and cricket boards ending days of negotiations over high-profile match. And China has dismissed U.S. allegations of secret nuclear explosive tests, calling the claims outright lies.
Beijing has accused Washington of using the issue as a pretext to resume its own nuclear trials. At the UN conference on disarmament in Geneva, U.S. Undersecretary of State for Arms Control Thomas Dinano accused China of carrying out nuclear tests, including one on the 22nd of June 2020. Also of preparing for additional tests with massive yields.
Dinano's comments came as he was presenting a new U.S. plan calling for three-way talks with Russia and China to set new limits on nuclear weapons. And this after the expiration of the New START, the last treaty between top nuclear powers, Washington and Moscow, last Thursday. Well, China had already rejected joining disarmament negotiations at this stage.
Now, reacting to fresh U.S. claims, China, in a statement to AFP, urged Washington to immediately stop its irresponsible actions. U.S. President Trump said in October that Washington would start testing nuclear weapons on an equal basis with Moscow and Beijing, but without elaborating or explaining what kind of nuclear testing he wanted to resume. And Bangladesh and United States have signed a reciprocal tariff agreement, marking a major step forward in their bilateral trade and economic relations.
Now, the agreement was signed Monday evening in Washington, D.C., following 9 months of negotiations that began in April last year. Now, on the Bangladesh side, the deal was signed by Commerce Advisor Sheikh Bashiruddin and National Security Advisor Khalilur Rahman. The United States was represented by Ambassador Jamieson Greer. Under the agreement, United States will reduce the reciprocal tariff on Bangladesh to 19%, and the rate was originally set at 37% and was brought down to 20% in August last year.
Bangladesh's Commerce Advisor described the agreement as a historic turning point. Sheikh Bashiruddin said that the deal marks a new level in bilateral economic and trade ties and will provide substantially enhanced market access for both countries.
National Security Advisor Khalilur Rahman, the lead negotiator for Bangladesh, said the tariff cut will give exporters a further edge and provide a strong boost to Bangladesh's garment sector. A key feature of the deal focuses on textiles and apparel. The United States has committed to establish a special mechanism under which certain garments made in Bangladesh using U.S.-produced cotton will receive zero reciprocal tariff in the American market.
The agreement received approval from Bangladesh's Council of Advisors earlier and will come into force once formal notifications are issued by both sides. The deal is seen as a significant move towards deepening trade cooperation between Dhaka and Washington.
And Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has secured a major win in snap elections.
The lower house has shifted heavily towards ruling coalition, giving Takaichi absolute power to implement her agenda. From boosting military spending, tax cuts and arms exports, Takaichi now faces the challenge to fulfill the promises she made.
Now, a day after a landslide victory, Takaichi struck a conciliatory tone over China. Japan's PM said she is ready for dialogue with Beijing. And this is in contrast to her earlier stance when she said China's attack on Taiwan would attract Japanese response.
Given that there are concerns and issues between Japan and China, communication is all the more important. Japan remains open to various forms of dialogue with China. At present as well, communication is taking place at various levels. Going forward, while continuing such communication, we will respond calmly and appropriately, always from the standpoint of our national interest.
Her earlier statement strained ties between both neighbors. Responding to Takaichi's return to power, China has sought an apology and vowed a resolute response against what they call any reckless act.
We once again urge the Japanese side to retract the erroneous remarks made by Takaichi regarding Taiwan and demonstrate basic sincerity in safeguarding the political foundation of China-Japan relations through concrete actions.
Now, Takaichi's return to power ends over a year-long political instability in Japan, and Japan has returned to stability after a tumultuous time under Fumio Kishida and Shigeru Ishiba. Takaichi's LDP has secured a two-thirds majority, giving her power to overrule upper house veto on decisions taken by the lower house and even carry out sweeping constitutional reforms.
The Democratic Party of Korea has expelled a senior leader over controversial derogatory remarks about foreign women.
Now, Kim Il-sung, the head of Jindo County, had proposed importing women to help stem country's population decline. During a live-stream town hall, Governor Kim had underlined an extinction crisis in rural areas and went on to propose importing women from Sri Lanka and Vietnam to marry bachelors. The remark immediately sparked shock and anger. Kim had to apologize, saying he chose his words poorly.
South Korea's population crisis is stark. The country is grappling with the world's lowest birth rate. The country's birth rate has repeatedly hit record lows. It fell to just 0.72 births per woman in 2023, before inching up slightly to 0.75 in 2024. At this pace, experts warn South Korea's population of 50 million could be cut in half within 60 years. rural areas are being hit the hardest as young people continue to leave for jobs and opportunity in Seoul.
Now, the government has tried to respond, including introducing a rural basic income. It offers monthly vouchers to residents in shrinking communities. Immigration has provided some relief. Well, more than 11,000 people became naturalized South Korean citizens last year, the highest number since the pandemic. Well, most new citizens from China come from China, Vietnam, and Southeast Asia. And India's Rafales are about to hit harder as New Delhi and Paris fast-track major defense deals.
India's air power is entering a new league. India is reportedly working to seal a deal for over 100 Rafale fighter jets. These stealth jets would also get a major boost with the addition of 2 deadly weapon systems. So a blend of deadlier missiles, longer reach and faster strikes. More details in this next report. Take a look.
India is moving swiftly to arm its Rafale fighter jets with the Scalp long-range cruise missile and the Meteor beyond visual range air-to-air missile. These weapons, designed to strike first and strike deep. The negotiations with France are being accelerated as part of a broader defense push that could also see India clear a massive deal for 114 new Rafale jets. Scalp is the game changer on the ground. Fired from high altitude, it can fly hundreds of kilometers, hugging terrain, evading radar, and smashing hardened targets with surgical precision. Bunkers, command centers, strategic infrastructure. Once launched, there is little warning and even less defense. Meteor dominates the skies, powered by a ram jet engine. It maintains speed deep into combat range, giving Rafale pilots unmatched kill probability against enemy aircraft. Unlike traditional missiles, Meteor doesn't lose energy at the final moment. It hunts relentlessly. Together, Scalp and Meteor turn Rafale into a lethal multi-role predator, capable of air dominance and deep strike missions in a single sortie. This follows the staggering success of Operation Sindoor last year, where Rafales reportedly used Scalp missiles to obliterate terrorist headquarters in Pakistan's Muridke and Bahawalpur with pinpoint precision. The deal for Scalp missiles alone is reportedly estimated at nearly $385 million. Add the potential clearance of 114 Rafale jets, a deal that could run into about $40 billion US. The message is unmistakable. India is investing in deterrence, not symbolism. Timing matters. Regional threats are evolving. Airspace is contested. Precision and speed now decide outcomes, not numbers alone. These upgrades allow India to strike targets without crossing borders, hit first if needed, and control escalation. French President Emmanuel Macron's upcoming India visit adds momentum. Defense ties between India and France are already deep. This phase makes them sharper. For the Indian Air Force, this is not just modernization, it is transformation. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Bitcoin has erased all of its gains since Donald Trump's election victory.
While prices have staged a partial rebound, analysts warn that shrinking market depth and rising volatility could keep digital assets on edge in the near term. Here's a deep dive into what's driving the turbulence in crypto market.
Bitcoin wiped out all of its gains since the election of U.S. President Donald Trump, who vowed to make America the crypto capital. The currency is down roughly 20% in recent sessions, reversing the rally that had pushed it to a record high above $125,000 in October. The sell-off coincides with broader investor concerns about inflated technology valuations and uncertainty over the U.S. Federal Reserve's rate cut trajectory. Precious metals and digital assets also dropped sharply after Trump named Kevin Warsh as the next Fed chair, raising expectations of potential balance sheet tightening. This move could potentially reduce liquidity in financial markets. Analysts point to a sustained contraction in market liquidity as a key concern. Bitcoin's average 1% market depth, a measure of how much capital is available near the current price, stood above the $8 million earlier in 2025. Following the October liquidation event, the largest in crypto history, that figure fell to around $6 million and has now declined further to roughly $5 million. Lower market depths means fewer buy and sell orders close to prevailing prices, making Bitcoin more vulnerable to sharp and erratic price swings. Analysts warn that thin liquidity conditions are likely to persist in the near term. Bitcoin initially surged after Trump's election victory as investors anticipated pro-crypto policies, while the administration has introduced regulatory changes and established a reserve using seized assets. It has not launched a large-scale government Bitcoin purchasing program, tempering market expectations. Trump's personal crypto gains have also raised eyebrows over conflict of interest concerns. At the same time, cryptocurrencies are increasingly correlated with equities during periods of market stress, making them more sensitive to macroeconomic developments. While some analysts believe selling pressure from large holders or whales is beginning to ease, suggesting a possible bottom formation. Others see limited bullish signals and expect continued volatility in the months ahead. Business Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, a high-profile case involving Meta Platforms and YouTube has kicked off at a California state court. The court case involves a 20-year-old woman identified as KGM.
The woman claims she became addicted to the company's platforms as a child and that their attention-grabbing designs contributed to her depression and suicidal thoughts. KGM filed a lawsuit against Meta Platforms, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, and Google, which owns YouTube. According to court filings, she claims the platform's attention-grabbing design got her addicted at a young age and that the apps fueled her depression and suicidal thoughts. She is seeking to hold the companies liable for the alleged harm. The lawsuit is one of thousands now facing the social media industry in California over harm to children's mental health.
The jury will decide whether the companies were negligent and whether KGM's use of the apps was a substantial factor in her mental health harm. Well, if claims succeed, jurors will then consider whether to award damages for pain and suffering and whether to impose punitive damages.
A verdict against the companies could smoothen the way for similar cases in state courts and shake the tech industry's long-standing U.S. legal defense against claims of user harm.
Meta and Google will challenge the claims. TikTok and Snap settled the case before the trial. Under U.S. law, internet companies are largely shielded from liability for material published by users. But if the jury rejects that protection in this case, it could open the door to further claims that social media platforms are harmful by design. In addition to the state-level cases, the companies are also facing more than 2,300 similar lawsuits in federal court, filed by parents, school districts, and state attorneys general.
And former captains Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli, who now only play ODIs for India, have dropped to category B in the BCCI's central list of contracted players for the 2025-26 season.
And the latest contracts run from October 1st, 2025 to September 30th, 2026. It was widely expected that Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma will see a drop in their central contracts after they retired both from Test cricket and T20 internationals last year. Well, to be part of the topmost category, a player needs to play in all three formats and hold an important role.
In the previous contract cycle, these two, along with Ravindra Jadeja, were in the grade A plus category, with 3 of them retiring from 1 or more formats. The BCCI decided against retaining the category.
So, BCCI's topmost contract for the current cycle is grade A, which has 3 players, Test and ODI's captain Shubham Gill, Jasprit Bumrah and Ravindra Jadeja. And this shows the faith the Indian Cricket Board has on Gill. Alongside Rohit and Virat, there are 9 other players in grade B, including T20I captain Suryakumar Yadav and Test vice captain Rishabh Pant. Surprisingly, Axar Patel has been demoted to grade C despite being a key player in both formats of white ball cricket. Overall, there are 17 players in grade C, but there is no place for Mohammad Shami, who was in grade A in the 2024-25 list, as well as Sarfraz Khan, Rajat Patidar and Mukesh Kumar. And for decades, the ritual of buying concert tickets has been either a matter of luck or test of patience.
Well, today it has become a new kind of fan revolution. From the streets of Mexico City to the halls of the US Congress, music lovers are no longer just complaining about sold-out shows. They are organizing legal means, holding protest marches, and forcing governments to look into the matter when they are unable to avail concert tickets. What began as a simple act of frustration has evolved into an international movement. After all, why should fans have to pay for sky-high resale prices? That's a question that a lot of people ask over technical failures that fail to recognize the bots and the humans. Just this month, in Mexico City, dozens of BTS fans, who are known as the Army, organized a formal march to denounce the chaotic sale of tickets for the group's highly anticipated return.
Now, despite many fans paying for exclusive memberships that intend to grant priority access, tickets vanished within seconds, only to reappear on third-party resale sites at a $500 markup. In response, Mexican authorities have launched an investigation.
Perhaps the most significant turning point occurred during Taylor Swift's The Eras tour, when Ticketmaster's website collapsed under the weight of 3.5 million verified fans. The backlash didn't stop at angry tweets. Fans, in fact, took the unprecedented step of forming vigilante groups. Vigilante Legal LLC, an organization that gathered evidence for a massive antitrust lawsuit. This Swiftie surge led to a US Senate Judiciary Committee hearing where senators from both parties grilled industry executives. Even the Department of Justice got involved in the investigation.
Now, the crisis reached a fever pitch in India during the concerts of Coldplay and Diljit Dosanjh. When official platforms sold out in minutes, tickets for Coldplay's Mumbai show were listed on unauthorized sites for as much as 1 lakh rupees, and that is nearly $1,200. Now, the backlash forced India's Enforcement Directorate to conduct raids across 5 states. The authorities ended up seizing laptops and phones used in illegal black marketing schemes.
The message from fans is clear. The era of passive frustration is over. If the fans are not getting their concert tickets for the right price, they are ready to use their power and even take you to court. All this for that one concert ticket.
And with that, we call a wrap to World DNA for today. We leave you with some climate stories making headlines across the world. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned who are watching WION World is Fun.
elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power. Only on WION. World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.